Abandoned at the depot on Christmas night, the young teacher slept alone. Until a rancher found her. Snow fell in slow, deliberate sheets, the kind that muted the world and swallowed sound whole. The tiny depot at Willow Creek Junction looked more like a forgotten shed at the end of the earth than a place meant to welcome new school teachers. Evelyn Hart stepped off the train with a hopeful heart and a thin wool coat, the hem of her skirt brushing icy slush. She set her single suitcase on the platform and looked around for someone, anyone, who might be there to greet her. There was no one. The train whistle echoed once, twice, then faded into the frozen night as the locomotive lurched forward, leaving Evelyn in a cloud of steam and swirling snow. She swallowed. "This must be the right place," she whispered, pulling a folded letter from her coat pocket. "We look forward to welcoming you to Willow Creek on Christmas Eve," the school board had written in neat ink. "A member of the board will meet you at the depot upon arrival." She had imagined a friendly handshake, a warm smile, perhaps even a small sleigh. But instead, cold wind cut through every layer of her clothing, numbing her fingers in minutes. Inside the depot, a single lantern glowed weakly from a hook in the ceiling. Wooden benches sat empty, their surfaces polished only by time and loneliness. A small pot-bellied stove popped and hissed, but the warmth barely reached the center of the room. The station master, Mr. Leary, looked up from his desk as she entered, his spectacles fogging from the sudden blast of frigid air. "Evenin', miss," he said kindly. "Train come in on time?" "Yes," Evelyn replied. "Oh, I'm supposed to be meeting the school board." Mr. Leary frowned. "Nobody came by for ya. I'm sure they must have been delayed." He gave her a look she recognized too well, the sort that adults gave children when they didn't want to say something unkind. "Well, Christmas Eve's a busy night," he offered gently. "People got families, meals, church services. Hardly anyone's out and about tonight." Evelyn tried to smile. "I'll wait. Someone will come." Mr. Leary nodded and went back to stamping papers, though he kept glancing at her with growing concern. A few minutes later, his wife, Mrs. Leary, came in carrying a tray of small tarts wrapped in cloth. "Oh dear," she murmured. "You must be freezing." "I'm all right," Evelyn assured her, though her voice trembled. Mrs. Leary set a tart in her hand. "You sure nobody's comin' for ya?" "Yes, I'm sure they're just late." She hated the waver in her own voice. Outside, the snow thickened, the night settling its heavy weight over the empty tracks. Time dragged on. 10 minutes became 30. 30 slipped into an hour. Then the depot clock ticked past 9. With each passing tick, the warmth in the station dimmed. The stove crackled low as the last log burned down to embers. Mr. Leary stifled a yawn. "Miss Hart, I hate to do this," he said, rubbing his neck. "But we're closin' the depot for the night. Town ordinance. Folks get rowdy this time of year." Evelyn's heart squeezed. "Oh, of course. I understand." Mrs. Leary bit her lip. "We've already got my sister and her 3 young uns stayin' with us, or we'd offer you a bed." Evelyn nodded quickly. "Please don't worry. I'll be fine." "You sure?" the woman insisted, her brow creased with worry. "It's bitter out. I'll stay on the bench here. I'll be all right until they arrive." "But the depot has to close, dear." Evelyn looked outside. Snow piled high along the platform. The wind howled like a living creature. The train tracks vanished into white nothingness. She mustered the bravest smile she could. "Truly, I'll manage. Someone will come soon." The couple exchanged uneasy glances. Mrs. Leary wrapped a second tart in cloth and pressed it into Evelyn's hands. "Here, for later. Just try to keep warm." "We'll be prayin' for you," Mr. Leary offered. "Thank you," Evelyn whispered. When they finally stepped out into the storm, locking the depot door behind them, the silence that followed felt immense. Evelyn sat on the bench, drawing her coat tighter. She tucked her suitcase beside her and leaned her head back against the wall, listening to the wind. Her breath formed trembling clouds in the cold. Minutes passed. Then long, lonely hours. Her fingers ached. Her toes stung, then slowly went numb. Shadows danced along the walls from the dying lantern. Somewhere outside, a church bell tolled 10 times. Christmas Eve. A night she had always loved. Back home, her father would be reading scripture by the fireside. Her little sister Lucy would be humming carols while stringing cranberries. Her mother would fuss over the pie crust. A tear slipped down Evelyn's cheek. She whispered into the quiet, "Lord, did I make a mistake coming here?" She felt foolish, naive, abandoned by people she had trusted. Her dream of teaching little ones, giving them warmth and knowledge, felt suddenly fragile against the brutal wind pressing against the depot walls. She closed her eyes and prayed, voice trembling. Please, don't let me be forgotten. The lantern flickered violently and dimmed again. Evelyn curled her legs close to her chest, hugging her suitcase to gather any scrap of warmth. Snow blew through a crack near the door, sprinkling the floor with white dust. Her eyelids became heavy with exhaustion, her thoughts drifting. The storm raged on. The depot stood silent. And Evelyn Hart, teacher, daughter, dreamer, lay half asleep on a hard wooden bench, her future uncertain, her hope flickering like the weak lantern above her. She did not know that someone was coming. Someone who had no intention of passing by. Someone who would change the course of her life. But for now, she slept alone on a snowy Christmas night, believing she'd been forgotten. The road leading past Willow Creek Depot was little more than a narrow ribbon of packed snow winding through dark pines. Rhett Dawson guided his horse, Marley, along the trail, the lantern on his saddle flickering with each gust of icy wind. Beside him rode his younger brother, Caleb, bundled so tightly in blankets that only his eyes were visible. You warm enough, kid? Rhett asked. Caleb nodded, though his teeth chattered. Warmer than at home with the chimney cracked again. Rhett chuckled. I told you I'd fix that in the morning. But the horses needed settling first, and then the wagon wheel broke. We should have been home hours ago, Caleb grumbled playfully. Yeah, well, winter's got its own schedule. The brothers rode in comfortable silence for a while, the kind that came naturally between them. The moon was hidden behind thick clouds, turning the world into a dark, swirling haze of snow. Rhett's thoughts drifted to the ranch waiting for them, quiet, simple, and always a little too empty this time of year. Christmas hadn't felt right since their parents passed. He and Caleb did their best with a small pine, a loaf of sweet bread, and the old hymnal their mother used to sing from. But there was a hollow place in the Dawson home no amount of ranch work could fill. A sudden blast of wind sprayed snow across Rhett's face, snapping him from his thoughts. Storm's picking up, he muttered. We'll cut past the depot. It's shorter. Caleb perked up. You think anybody's traveling tonight? Not unless they're desperate. The depot loomed ahead, small, dark, half buried in snowdrifts. A weak lantern glowed inside, casting long golden stripes across the platform. Rhett almost rode past. Almost. But something tugged at the corner of his vision, a shape on the wooden bench inside. Small. Curled. Motionless. He slowed to a stop. Rhett. Caleb whispered. Why re we stoppin'? Rhett squinted, heart tightening. I'm not sure yet. He dismounted, boots crunching into deep snow. The wind pushed against him as he strode toward the depot, lantern swinging in his hand. When he reached the door he found it locked, closed for the night just as Mr. Leary always did. But through the frost-covered window he could see it more clearly now. A young woman, slumped sideways, arms wrapped around herself, a thin coat dusted with white. His breath caught sharply. He didn't hesitate. One strong shove broke the ice seal around the door, and it creaked open with a groan. A burst of freezing wind swept inside as Rhett stepped in. The lantern overhead flickered weakly, revealing the pale face of Evelyn Hart, asleep but shivering violently. Miss? Rhett said, his voice firm but gentle. Can you hear me? Her eyelids fluttered, heavy with exhaustion. She tried to sit up, but her limbs trembled. I was waiting, she whispered. They were supposed to meet me. Rhett knelt beside her. Her skin was chilled, her fingertips almost blue. You'll freeze to death if you stay here another hour, he said, heart pounding with urgency. How long have you been alone? She tried to think. Time had blurred into a cold fog. Since the train arrived. I thought someone would come. Rhett felt anger simmer, not at her, but at the people who had abandoned her without a second thought. What's your name? He asked, his tone softening. Evelyn. Evelyn Hart. I'm Rhett Dawson, he said. My brother Caleb and I live a few miles from here. Evelyn blinked, shivering harder. Your brother? Rhett glanced over his shoulder at the open door, where Caleb peeked in, eyes wide with concern. Ma'am, Caleb said shyly. Are you hurt? No, she murmured, just cold. Rhett made a quick decision. Evelyn, I'm taking you to our ranch. There's food, warmth, a real bed. We'll sort things out in the morning. Evelyn's instincts warred with exhaustion. She had been raised to be cautious, yet she could hardly feel her fingers. Every breath burned in her chest. And Rhett, tall, broad-shouldered, steady-eyed, radiated the kind of calm that made trust feel safe. Still hesitant, she whispered, I don't want to be a burden. You won't be, he replied simply. I promise. He removed his heavy coat and draped it around her shoulders. She inhaled the faint scent of pine, leather, and something warm she couldn't name. Can you stand? He asked. She tried and nearly collapsed. Rhett caught her easily, supporting her weight with one arm while grabbing her suitcase with the other. You're all right, he murmured. Lean on me. The wind slapped their faces as he guided her to the horses. Caleb rushed ahead, clearing snow off Marley's saddle with his gloves. Should she ride Marley? Caleb asked worriedly. She'll ride with me, Rhett said. He lifted Evelyn gently into the saddle, settling her in front of him so she wouldn't fall. She shivered uncontrollably, but the moment Rhett swung up behind her, his arms bracing either side of her, she felt a hint of warmth seep into her tired limbs. Hold on to me, he said. The trail's rough. She gripped his forearm weakly. His body heat felt like salvation. Caleb mounted his pony, and the three began their slow journey through the storm. For a long time no one spoke. The only sounds were the horses' hooves crunching through snow and the distant howl of winter wind through the pines. But then Evelyn, half-conscious, whispered, I'm sorry you had to stop. Rhett leaned close so she could hear him. Miss Hart, we didn't have to. We were meant to. A shiver, not from cold, ran through her. As they rode into the swirling darkness, a new feeling stretched between them. Uncertain. Unspoken. But real. The storm raged on, but for the first time that night, Evelyn Hart felt she might not be alone after all. The Dawson Ranch came into view like a faint promise in the storm, warm lamplight glowing through frosted windows, smoke curling upward from a chimney valiantly fighting the winter wind. For Evelyn, drifting in and out of cold-numbed consciousness, it looked almost unreal, like something painted softly into a dream. Rhett felt her weaken in his arms and tightened his hold. We're here, he murmured into her frost-kissed hair. Just a bit longer, Miss Hart. Caleb hopped off his pony immediately and rushed ahead, pushing open the front door so the warm air poured out in a welcoming wave. Evelyn stirred at the sudden change in temperature. The warmth hit her face, making her eyes sting with relief. Rhett slid off Marley, then turned and lifted her down, careful, gentle, as though she were fragile glass. Her feet barely touched the floor before he guided her inside. The Dawson home smelled of pine, wood smoke, and bread, real bread, not the dry travel biscuits she'd been living on. A small Christmas pine stood proudly by the hearth, decorated with strings of dried orange slices and Caleb's uneven paper stars. For a house carved out of the edge of the frontier, it felt surprisingly lived in. Human. Caleb shut the door behind them and scrambled toward the hearth. I'll get blankets. Miss Hart, do you want Mama's quilt? It's the warmest one we got. Evelyn's lips curved faintly despite her shivering. That sounds lovely, Caleb. Rhett helped her to the big armchair by the fire. It swallowed her small frame as he knelt to remove her snow-crusted boots. You don't have to, she began. Yes, I do, Rhett said simply. He set her boots near the hearth to dry, then tossed a few thick logs onto the fire. Sparks flared, flames stretching upward as heat filled the room. Caleb returned, dragging an armful of blankets, 2 woolen throws and a faded quilt of blues and greens. This one was Mama's, he said proudly, draping it over Evelyn's lap. She made it from Papa's old shirts. Evelyn traced one of the sewn squares with trembling fingers. It's beautiful. Caleb's smile stretched wide, then softened into concern. You looked awful cold at the depot. Did they really leave you all alone? The bluntness of children always came without cruelty. Evelyn swallowed, keeping her voice steady. Yes, but your brother found me in time. And I'm very grateful. Rhett busied himself at the stove, ladling hot stew into bowls, giving them a moment. When he returned, he set one into Evelyn's hands. Careful. It's hot, he said. Just hold it for the warmth first. The bowl radiated heat into her palms, and she could have cried from the simple relief. Rhett took a seat on the hearthstones beside her, studying her face with a mixture of concern and quiet admiration. You're still shaken, he noted. It'll pass once your blood warms. Caleb plopped onto the floor next to his brother, cross-legged, eyes fixed on Evelyn with a mixture of curiosity and awe. You're really a teacher? He asked, as though teachers belonged in far-off stories instead of storms. Yes, Evelyn replied, the warmth beginning to return to her voice. I came here to teach the children of Willow Creek. Caleb brightened. I ain't had a teacher since spring. Mrs. Greenwood left after she got married. I've been practicing my letters, though. Rhett helps some. But he's awful at cursive. Rhett shot him a look. I'm decent at cursive. Nope, Caleb said cheerfully. You make your L's look like fishing hooks? Evelyn laughed, soft, surprised, genuine. The sound warmed the room more than the fire did. Rhett's gaze flicked toward her, drawn in a way he didn't fully understand yet. She lifted the spoon and tasted the stew. The hot broth nearly brought tears to her eyes again. This is wonderful, she murmured. I haven't eaten anything warm since. Her voice cut off. The truth sat heavy, since she'd left home with no one meeting her, no supper waiting, no welcome offered. Rhett recognized the shadow in her expression. You're safe now, he said quietly. That's what matters. Safe. The words settled around her like another blanket. As she finished the stew, Rhett rose and fetched a lantern. I'll heat water for tea. It'll help. Thank you, she whispered. Caleb took her empty bowl and carried it carefully to the sink. You can stay here as long as you need, he said with 11-year-old certainty. Right, Rhett? Rhett's reply was instant. Right. Evelyn looked between the two brothers, their easy bond, their quiet care, their home that felt more welcoming in 10 minutes than Willow Creek had in all its letters. I don't know how to thank you, she said softly. You already did, Rhett answered. By letting us help. The fire crackled, sending warm flickers of gold across Evelyn's tired face. Her eyelids dipped, heavy from exhaustion, warmth, and the safety she hadn't expected to find tonight. Rhett noticed immediately. You need rest. Caleb grabbed the cot. We'll set it near the hearth. The boy hurried off, and within minutes they had arranged a comfortable sleeping place. Evelyn protested weakly, insisting she didn't want to trouble them, but Rhett only shook his head. You've been through enough for one night. Sleep. She lay back on the cot, wrapped in Mama Dawson's quilt. The fire's glow painted the rafters above her in warm amber light. Good night, Miss Hart, Caleb said, crawling onto the rug with his own blanket. Good night, Caleb, she whispered. Rhett lingered a moment, hands on his hips, watching her with a gentleness he rarely allowed himself to show. If you need anything, he said softly, just call my name. Her eyes fluttered. Good night, Rhett. That was the first time she said his name. It struck him in a way he wasn't prepared for. He dimmed the lantern. Evelyn fell asleep within minutes, the storm easing outside, the fire keeping its loyal vigil. For the first time in a long while, the Dawson home felt full again. For the first time since stepping off that lonely train, Evelyn Hart felt she had stepped into the beginning of something. A new life. A new chapter. A new chance. Little did she know, both brothers would remember this Christmas night for the rest of their lives. Morning dawned with a thin layer of golden light stretching across the snowy valley. The storm had finally quieted, leaving the world hushed, blanketed in white. Evelyn awoke to the soft crackle of the dying fire and the smell of something warm drifting from the kitchen. For a moment she forgot where she was. Then she saw Caleb curled on the rug, still asleep under his blanket, and Rhett standing at the stove pouring coffee. He glanced over his shoulder and offered her a small, genuine smile. Mornin', Miss Hart. You sleep any? A little, she admitted, sitting up slowly. You're home, it's very warm. Caleb snores, Rhett said with a shrug. I do not. Caleb mumbled from the floor, eyes still closed. The sudden burst of laughter, gentle, easy, lifted the heaviness that had settled in her chest since she stepped off that train. For the first time, Evelyn realized she was smiling without effort. Rhett handed her a cup of hot tea, steam curling in the cold air. We should head into town soon, he said. Clear up matters with the school board. Get answers. Evelyn nodded, though her stomach tightened. She'd always imagined her first meeting with the town as warm and welcoming, children peeking curiously from windows, a kindly committee greeting her with handshakes and gratitude. Not whatever had happened last night. Still, she had no choice. She was a teacher. And she would face her duty with grace. The wagon ride to Willow Creek was quiet, the morning sun sparkling on snowdrifts like scattered diamonds. Evelyn sat beside Rhett, wrapped tightly in his mother's quilt. Caleb rode behind them, humming some half-remembered Christmas tune. The town appeared slowly through the frosty air, small wooden buildings sitting shoulder to shoulder, smoke rising from chimneys, a church steeple pointing heavenward. People moved about in coats and scarves, carrying parcels, sweeping steps, tending to animals. Evelyn's heartbeat quickened. This is where I was meant to live. These are the people I was meant to serve. Yet as Rhett guided the horses down Main Street, something in the atmosphere shifted. People paused. Wash, whispered. A few nodded politely at Rhett. Others eyed Evelyn's presence beside him with raised brows, lips pressed thin in speculation. She folded her hands tightly in her lap. Don't mind them, Rhett murmured. Town folk like to stare whenever something new happens. And they don't see new very often. Caleb added brightly, they'll love you once they know you, Miss Hart. She hoped so. The meeting hall was a plain wooden building with a large double door and a bulletin board plastered with school notices and church announcements. Rhett helped Evelyn down from the wagon and carried her suitcase to the steps, though she insisted she could manage. Inside, the hall was warm but smelled of old paper and wood polish. A long table sat in the center where 3 men and 1 woman shuffled papers and muttered about numbers. At the head sat Mr. Edgar Tompkins, the school board chairman, stout, balding, wearing a vest that strained at the seams. He looked up when the trio entered, his expression already impatient. Yes? Can I help you? He asked as though they were interrupting something important. Evelyn stepped forward, hands clasped. Good morning. I'm Evelyn Hart, the new schoolteacher. I arrived last night but no one. Yes, Tompkins interrupted, waving a dismissive hand. We are aware. Sir, she said gently, your letter said. The board did not expect you last night, Tompkins huffed. Christmas Eve is hardly a practical day for arrivals. But your letter said Christmas Eve, Evelyn repeated, keeping her tone respectful despite the sting inside her chest. Tompkins avoided her gaze. Well, we may have overestimated our preparedness. Rhett stepped up beside her, posture firm. You left her alone in the cold. That ain't being unprepared, that's being irresponsible. A murmur rose among the other board members, but Tompkins' face reddened. We could hardly be expected to house her, he snapped. Arrangements were not finalized. Lodging is not yet, already? He shuffled some papers as if that would justify anything. So what was she supposed to do? Rhett demanded. Freeze on a bench? Evelyn placed a calming hand on Rhett's arm. Please. I just want to understand what I should do now. Tompkins cleared his throat. School begins after New Year. Until then you will need to find someone to take you in. Rhett spoke before Evelyn could open her mouth. She's already with us. She'll stay at the ranch. The room froze. Mrs. Harwood, the lone woman on the board, adjusted her spectacles. With you? A single man? Caleb piped in matter-of-factly, I'm there too. Tompkins gave a pointed sniff. Well, if you insist, Mr. Dawson. I do, Rhett said steadily. Evelyn's cheeks warmed with embarrassment, but also with something else. Relief. Gratitude. A sense of being defended, protected, cared for. She bowed her head slightly. Thank you, Mr. Dawson. Rhett met her eyes for a brief second. Anytime, Miss Hart. She wasn't sure if it was the warmth of the meeting hall or the warmth of Rhett's gaze, but something fluttered deep inside her chest. Outside, as they stepped back into the cold air, Evelyn exhaled slowly, her breath fogging. I'm sorry, she said. I didn't mean to cause trouble. You didn't, Rhett answered without hesitation. The board ought to be ashamed, not you. Caleb took her hand, swinging it playfully. They're just grumpy 'cause they're old. Rhett chuckled under his breath. Evelyn looked around, at the town, at the people bustling past, at the snowy rooftops gleaming in the morning sun. For the first time, she realized that while the town might not have welcomed her warmly, the Dawson brothers had. And sometimes family wasn't found in the place you expected, but in the place that reached for you when you needed it most. She climbed back into the wagon, her heart lighter than when she'd arrived. The town might have turned a cold shoulder. But the ranch, the brothers, the warmth she'd found there, that was real, and growing, and beginning to feel like something she didn't want to lose. By the time the wagon crunched back into the Dawson ranch yard, the winter sun had dipped behind the hills, leaving the sky painted in soft purples and fading gold. The house glowed from within, lamps lit early, smoke curling lazily from the chimney, the scent of pine drifting in the crisp air. To Evelyn, the home looked almost magical against the snow. A warm lantern in a cold, dark world. Rhett helped her down from the wagon. She hesitated, not because she needed help, but because the simple courtesy made her throat tighten with gratitude she struggled to express. Thank you, she murmured. Rhett nodded, brushing snow from his coat. Come on inside. We'll get supper going. Caleb leapt off the back of the wagon before either of them could react, nearly losing his balance in the snow. Miss Hart, I'm gonna show you the stars tonight. They're real bright after a snowstorm. Evelyn laughed softly. I'd like that, Caleb. Rhett shot his brother a look. She just got back. Let her breathe first. Caleb grinned unabashedly. She can breathe outside too. Evelyn covered her smile behind her mittened hand. Inside, the house was alive with warmth. The fire crackled merrily in the stone hearth, throwing flickers of gold across the walls. Caleb dragged the little pine tree closer to the fire and fussed over its decorations: paper stars, dried orange slices, a few carved wooden animals. Evelyn set her suitcase gently in the corner, still planning to unpack only the essentials. She didn't want to impose. But the truth was, the ranch already felt more like home than any place she'd slept in weeks. Rhett opened a tin on the shelf and brought down a loaf of sweetbread. "Ma's recipe," he said, slicing it carefully. "We bake it every Christmas. Figure tonight counts." Caleb popped up beside him. "And we're making stew again. Rhett's good at stew." "Stew's easy," Rhett said modestly, chopping carrots. "Just toss things in a pot and hope for the best." "You forgot the salt last time," Caleb pointed out. Rhett nudged him with his elbow. "Hush." Evelyn clapped a hand over her mouth, shoulders shaking with laughter. She moved toward the kitchen counter. "Can I help?" Rhett opened his mouth to refuse. She was a guest after all, but something in her expression made him pause. She needed to contribute. Needed to feel useful. It was in her nature. "Sure," he said quietly. "If you're up to it." Evelyn rolled up her sleeves and began washing potatoes at the basin. The rhythmic sound of water, vegetables hitting the pot, Caleb's chatter about Christmas plans, it created a warm harmony, something domestic, something that felt impossibly right. Rhett found himself watching her far too often. The way the lamplight caught shadows in her dark hair. The steadiness in her hands despite everything she'd been through. The gentle grace she carried, even exhausted and bruised by disappointment. He cleared his throat and focused on the stew. After supper was simmering, Caleb insisted they sing Christmas songs, "Because we have a teacher now, and teachers always sing better than ordinary folk." Evelyn flushed. "I'm not sure I sing better." Rhett leaned back in his chair. "Let's find out." Caleb grabbed their mother's old hymnal and plopped it into Evelyn's lap. Evelyn looked down at the worn leather cover, fingers brushing the faded hand-stitched initials. "M.D. Margaret Dawson." "Are you sure?" she asked softly. "This is special." Rhett's expression softened. "You're special too." She inhaled sharply, eyes dropping to the page. Caleb didn't notice the sudden stillness between them. "Sing Silent Night." Evelyn began in a shy, trembling voice. "Silent night, holy night." Her voice was soft, warm, unpolished but sincere, like light filtering through stained glass. Caleb joined in off-key. Rhett hummed the harmony his mother taught him long ago. As the final note faded, the house felt strangely full, of memory, of warmth, of something new taking root. Caleb leaned his head against Evelyn's shoulder. "That was nice," he said sleepily. Evelyn wrapped an arm around him, heart swelling. "Thank you, Caleb." Rhett watched them, something tender and aching rising in his chest. Caleb fell asleep right after supper, curled under his blanket on the rug. Evelyn knelt to tuck the quilt around him, smoothing his hair back from his forehead. "He trusts you," Rhett said quietly from behind her. She turned, surprised by the softness in his voice. "I like him very much. He has a kind heart." Rhett nodded. "He hasn't had many women around since Ma died." Emotion flickered across his face, brief but unmistakable. Evelyn stood and stepped closer, her voice gentle. "You've done a wonderful job caring for him, Rhett." He looked away, jaw tightening. "I try. Some days I'm better at ranchin' than raising a boy." "You're doing both," she said. "And you're doing them well." His eyes met hers, steady, quiet, longing just beneath the surface. Silence stretched warm and fragile between them, like a thread drawn tight. "You don't have to keep thanking me," he said finally. "Anyone would have taken you in." "But they didn't," she replied softly. "You did." The truth hung in the air. Rhett shifted, clearing his throat. "If you ever feel uncomfortable here—" "I don't," she cut in almost too quickly. "Truly. Your home feels safe." Her confession washed over him like heat. He stepped closer, slow, hesitant, careful not to cross a line neither of them had spoken aloud yet. "I'm glad," he said. Their eyes held. For a moment, the world shrank to nothing but the space between them, the faint crackle of the fire, the soft rise and fall of Caleb's breathing. Evelyn's heart pounded in her chest. She wasn't ready to name the feeling blooming inside her, but she knew it wasn't fear. Not anymore. Later, when the fire had quieted and the house settled into peaceful stillness, Evelyn stood at the window watching snowflakes drift under the moonlight. Rhett joined her, hands tucked into his pockets. "What are you thinking about?" he asked quietly. She hesitated. "That maybe the Lord didn't forget me last night. That maybe he led me exactly where I needed to be." Rhett's breath hitched slightly, almost imperceptibly. I thought the same thing. Evelyn ducked her head, cheeks warming. Rhett reached out, then stopped, fingertips hovering near her elbow, close enough to feel her warmth but not daring to touch. Evelyn, he said gently, voice deep with sincerity, you ain't alone anymore. She looked up at him, eyes shining. I know. In the soft, holy quiet of Christmas night, Evelyn's heart felt something she hadn't known in a long time. Belonging. Warmth. The beginning of love. Morning arrived slowly, with a pale winter sun stretching across the Dawson ranch like it was afraid to disturb the peace inside. Frost clung to the windows, turning the world beyond into a shimmering, silver-white landscape. Evelyn woke to the soft hiss of bacon in a pan, and Caleb humming a Christmas hymn off-key. She blinked sleep from her eyes and sat up, momentarily confused by the warm quilt tucked around her. Then it returned, last night, the music, Rhett's gentle promises, the safety of this little ranch. And something else. A spark inside her that still glowed. She stepped into the main room. Caleb, still in his nightshirt, bounced around the stove with more enthusiasm than accuracy. Rhett caught sight of her and smiled, an unguarded, warm smile that softened his whole face. Mornin', Evelyn, he said. Good morning, she replied, her cheeks warming. You're just in time. Caleb announced. We're making Christmas breakfast. Rhett says it don't matter that it's not Christmas Day. Every day can have Christmas breakfast if you've got enough bacon, Rhett said, flipping a slice with exaggerated skill. Evelyn laughed. She had not laughed this freely in a long time. They sat down together, bacon, fresh biscuits, and a small bowl of berry preserves Rhett had been saving for a special day. Today was somehow special. Caleb chattered while they ate, telling Evelyn about his plans for the school year and how he wanted to learn real science and real history, and not just how to spell cattle. Evelyn listened, touched. I'd be glad to teach you all of that. She didn't say if she stayed, because the thought of leaving twisted something inside her chest. Rhett watched her with quiet interest. You're good with him, he murmured. Better than I expected any stranger could be. She gave him a soft smile. He's a remarkable boy. Rhett cleared his throat, suddenly flustered. Well, he gets it from, he faltered. Someone, I guess. Evelyn laughed again, and Rhett's ears turned the faintest shade of red. Later, Rhett offered her a coat so she could explore the ranch. It's a bit big, he warned, helping her slip into it. The coat dwarfed her, practically swallowing her hands, but it smelled like cedar and would smoke, like Rhett, and she pulled it tight around her with a shy smile. They stepped out into the crisp morning, snow crunching beneath their boots. Caleb ran ahead, leaving zigzag tracks behind him, while Evelyn and Rhett walked side by side. The ranch spread out before them, rolling hills blanketed in snow, a barn with its red paint peeking through frost, horses steaming softly in the cold, breath rising like little clouds. It's beautiful, Evelyn whispered. Rhett nodded. It's home. Evelyn rubbed her hands together. It feels like one. Her words struck him more deeply than she realized. He swallowed, staring out at the horizon. You know, I wasn't sure I'd ever hear someone say that about this place again. She turned to him gently. Your mother? Rhett nodded. She loved this land. Loved keeping a warm home. Ever since she passed, I haven't known if I was doing it right. He exhaled, fog curling from his lips. But with you here, the house feels different. Evelyn's heart fluttered. I haven't felt this safe in a long time, she admitted quietly. They shared a moment of unspoken tenderness, the winter air crisp around them. A sudden shout broke the stillness. Caleb waved from across the yard. Rhett. Evelyn. There's someone coming. Rhett's expression darkened as he shielded his eyes. A lone rider approached along the frozen path, a man bundled in thick furs, horse kicking up snow with each step. Rhett stepped slightly in front of Evelyn, protective without thinking. The rider dismounted, face set, breath visible in the cold. You Rhett Dawson? He asked gruffly. I am. The man reached into his coat. Evelyn stiffened, but he only pulled out a sealed envelope. Letter from Willow Creek School Board, he said. Evelyn's stomach twisted as Rhett took it. The rider rode off without another word, leaving the three of them staring into the white stillness. Rhett turned the envelope over once, hesitating. It's addressed to you, Evelyn. Her heart pounded. Caleb bounced on his heels. Open it. Maybe it's good. But Evelyn's breath had already gone shallow. The school board. The people who had abandoned her. The people who left her to freeze at the depot while they went home to warm fires and family. Her hands shook as she broke the seal. Rhett watched her, jaw tight. Whatever it says, he said, voice soft and earnest, you ain't fassin' it alone. Evelyn nodded and unfolded the letter. Her eyes moved slowly over the scripted ink. When she reached the end, her breath caught. Caleb leaned in. What does it say? Evelyn swallowed hard. They apologized for not arriving at the depot. Said it was a misunderstanding. Her voice trembled. And, they want me to begin teaching on Monday. A silence fell over the snowy yard. Caleb's face lit up. That's good, isn't it? Evelyn looked at him, then at Rhett, and her heart squeezed painfully. It is, she whispered. It should be. Rhett took a slow breath. But. Evelyn closed her eyes, her voice breaking with vulnerable honesty. But it means I'd have to leave here. The wind stilled as if even the world held its breath. Rhett didn't speak at first. His eyes softened, a storm of emotion flickering behind them, pain, longing, resignation. Finally he stepped closer, his voice low and steady. Evelyn, you don't owe that town anything. He swallowed. But you owe yourself the life you dreamed of. She blinked away tears. I don't know what my dream is anymore. Rhett's breath hitched just slightly. Caleb's small voice cut through the silence, uncertain and afraid. You'd leave us? Evelyn knelt beside him instantly, pulling him into her arms. Oh, Caleb, she whispered. I don't want to leave you. Not either of you. Rhett stared at her, really stared, realizing that her words were not polite or dutiful. They were true. They returned to the house in silence, each carrying a different kind of weight. As Evelyn warmed her hands by the fire, Rhett stood behind her, struggling with words he'd never had to say before. Finally he exhaled. Evelyn, whatever you choose. His voice thickened. This home will feel emptier without you. She turned slowly, heart pounding. Rhett. He looked at her, eyes raw. I've only known you a short time. But you've changed things around here. You've changed me. And that ain't something I say lightly. Evelyn drew in a shaky breath, her entire world narrowing to the rancher standing before her. The man who had found her, sheltered her, protected her heart without demanding anything in return. I feel something here I've never felt before, she whispered. Something I'm afraid to lose. Rhett stepped closer, his voice a low murmur. Then maybe. He swallowed. Don't leave. The words hung between them, fragile and powerful, like a prayer whispered in a quiet chapel. And Evelyn realized something. Her life had changed the moment Rhett Dawson found her in the snow. A deep quiet settled over the Dawson ranch that evening, the kind of peace that comes right before a heart is about to choose its future. Snow continued falling in slow, shimmering flakes, each one carried gently on the wind like a whispered invitation. Evelyn stood alone on the porch, clutching the school board letter in trembling fingers. The lantern beside her swayed lightly, casting a warm halo around her. She stared out into the vast white world, her breath curling into the cold night air. She had wanted this job for so long. Wanted a classroom. A chance to stand before children with chalk in her hand and a heart full of hope. Then the depot happened. Then Rhett Dawson happened. Then Caleb's small hand found hers. And everything she thought she knew about her future shifted like snow rolling off a rooftop. Behind her, the floorboards creaked. Rhett stepped onto the porch, coat collar dusted with snow, face lit softly by the lantern glow. You all right? He asked in a low voice. Evelyn didn't turn at first. Her heart beat too loudly, her thoughts too fragile. I don't want to make the wrong decision, she whispered. Rhett took a slow breath. He didn't reach for her. He always waited for her to choose, but his quiet presence wrapped around her like warmth. There's no wrong decision, he said. Just the one that brings you peace. She closed her eyes. I don't know where my peace is, she confessed. Rhett stared out into the snow with her. I reckon peace ain't always in where you thought you were headed, he said. Sometimes it's in what surprised you. His voice softened. Or who? The wind lifted the ends of her hair. She felt him watching her, not with pressure, not with expectation, but with a longing he hadn't spoken aloud, though it lived in every quiet act of kindness he'd shown. I'm afraid, she admitted. Of what? That if I stay here, it won't just be for the school. It'll be for... Her voice trembled. For you. Rhett's breath caught. Snow drifted between them like falling grace. Finally he said it, voice low, almost reverent. Evelyn, I've been trying real hard not to hope for that. But I'd be lying to the Lord and myself if I said I didn't want you here. Not just as a teacher. He hesitated. But as part of our family. Her heart clenched. A long silence followed, a tender, holy stillness that felt bigger than both of them. Then another voice broke it. Miss Hart. Caleb stood in the doorway, hair mussed, blanket wrapped around him. Evelyn knelt immediately and held out her arms. He rushed into them, clinging to her like she was the anchor that kept his little world steady. "Are you gonna leave?" he whispered. She pressed her cheek to his dark hair. "I don't want to." Caleb leaned back, eyes shimmering. "Then stay. Please stay. I prayed last night after you fell asleep." He swallowed. "I asked God to let you be part of our home." Evelyn's breath broke. Rhett closed his eyes, pain and hope warring in his expression. Evelyn cupped Caleb's cheek. I think God might have already answered your prayer, sweetheart." Caleb's face lit up with soft, exhausted joy. "He did." She hugged him tight. "Yes, he did." Inside, the fire burned bright, chasing shadows across the walls. Rhett set Caleb back in bed, and Evelyn tucked him in with practiced gentleness. "Are you gonna be here in the morning?" Caleb asked, blinking sleepily. Evelyn and Rhett exchanged a look filled with unspoken emotion. She brushed Caleb's hair from his forehead. "Yes," she whispered. "I'll be here in the morning." Caleb sighed in relief and drifted into sleep. When Rhett and Evelyn stepped outside the room, the tension between them softened, not gone but changed, warmed like snow melting under the steady glow of dawn. "You made him awful happy," Rhett murmured. "I didn't mean to," she admitted softly. Rhett's eyes held hers. "You made me awful happy too." Her breath caught. Slowly, almost hesitantly, Rhett lifted his hand. He didn't touch her, not at first. He let his fingertips hover just above her cheek, giving her every chance to step away. Evelyn didn't move. He brushed a strand of hair from her face, the first tender, deliberate touch between them. Her eyes fluttered closed. "Evelyn," he whispered, "you don't have to decide right now. But if you stay, if you want this ranch, this family..." His voice deepened. "You won't be alone. Not ever again." Her eyes opened, bright with unshed tears. "I do want it," she breathed. "More than I ever expected to." Rhett's breath trembled. He cupped her cheek fully this time, warm, steady, reverent. "You have no idea what that means to me." Evelyn lifted her hand to his, fingers sliding over calloused skin, holding him there. "I think I do," she whispered. And for the first time since she had stepped off the train, she wasn't afraid of what came next. The wind outside grew gentle, brushing snow from the eaves like a benediction. The lanterns glowed low. The ranch felt like a cradle of peace. Rhett leaned forward, slow, careful, giving her all the time in the world to pull away. She didn't. Their foreheads touched lightly, breath mingling in the soft hush of the night. A prayer formed inside her, though she did not speak it aloud. "Thank you for leading me here. Thank you for not abandoning me at that depot. Thank you for giving me more than I ever dreamed." Finally, Rhett whispered, "You stayin', Evelyn?" She nodded, tears slipping down her cheeks. "Yes," she breathed. "I'm staying." Relief washed over him, raw and profound. He pulled her gently into his arms, holding her as if she were the missing piece of his life he hadn't known he was searching for. Evelyn buried her face in his chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart, the warmth of his strength, the truth of her decision settling into her soul like the softest snowfall. This was home. This was hope. This was love, quietly begun on a Christmas night when she thought the world had forgotten her. But God had not forgotten her. Rhett had not forgotten her. And now, neither would Christmas ever be the same again.